gonna go here. I'm gonna post the link. Streamers. Okay, I've got the stream up, so hopefully the streamers think it's nice and they can hear me, and then we'll be good to get started for today. Filling in for JJ again. I know I haven't been here in a while, so I hope class is going well for everybody. You know, you guys are getting close to the end now, right? Getting kind of exciting. Is it starting to get more difficult, a little bit easier?
Yes.
Yeah? Oh, okay. Yeah. I suppose it depends on the topic and you know, what's going on. The stream good out there, streamers? I got an okay, but I don't know if that's because my stream's good or the stream's out there. So if someone could let me know that the stream's good, we can go ahead and get started. Anyone? So this is the point in the class where we struggled with people would say I'm streaming and then never show up again. So I don't know. I trust you're all streaming out there. If someone could let me know that this is actually working, I'm just going to go ahead and get going. And TAs just monitor those. If someone says something's not cool, then we'll go ahead and stop. So welcome back to class. You guys started talking about Mongo and Mongoose. Anyone have any questions so far on what you've learned? Anything you want clarified? I happen to use Mongo and Mongoose a lot at work, so I'm pretty familiar with it, just at a professional level. So hopefully I can offer some insight different than JJ's, which might make it better, might make it worse. I have no idea. But no questions? Everyone's good? Cool. Well, we're going to talk a little bit at first about web scraping. Does anyone know what web scraping is? Term? Not you. Yeah, what is it?
Grabbing HTML elements off of a website. Right.
It's like automatic scanning of a web page or something like that, right? And so they do it by grabbing HTML elements. They grab the DOM off of a web page somehow, sift through the content on that web page, and then do something fun with it, right? And we're going to do a little bit of that today. Not super advanced, but it'll be fun anyway. What are some of the legal boundaries we could get into with web scraping? Does anyone have any ideas of how that could be construed?
Use of proprietary information.
Use of proprietary information, probably not a good thing, right? Yep, corporate infringement, yeah. So it's kind of funny. I don't know myself of any hardcore, concrete legal ramifications for web scraping, I guess, unless the company that you're scraping from has a direct license on their web page that says, hey, don't scrape this page, which don't know if that's a valid license. So it's kind of a weird gray area. Just be careful if you do it. I probably wouldn't web scrape a bunch of stuff that isn't explicitly okay with it, and use that in your own personal projects for your own, especially for your own financial gain. As soon as you get into that area, it becomes weird, you know? So that's when to watch out. But otherwise, web scraping, it's a pretty cool thing to do, especially for learning.
Proprietary information? What if it's just like scraping news articles?
Right, I mean,
could be disseminating that.
So if it's like on a free website, it's probably okay, right? And it depends on what you're doing with it. But just, I think what the point of me saying this to you is just be careful of any licensing that could be there we're not aware of, right? Especially in software, it becomes really weird with licenses. There's like 50 billion licenses. They all mean different things. Some of them mean, hey, you can use this code in all of your projects as long as, you know, the projects are open source. Hey, you can use this code in your projects, but only if they're, you know, up to this many devs. Like, they're crazy licenses. And just watch out for those things, right? So it's really just a note to be mindful of what's out there in the software world. It's just, I don't think the legal system has really advanced far enough to understand it completely yet. So it's just weird, you know. It's hard to know all of the ins and outs of how it works legally. I don't know. There's so much I don't know about legal ramifications of software, how you use software and stuff like that. It's just, you know, so be careful. That's the cautionary tale of trilogies that they have right here. So be careful with that. So one thing we're going to look at today, we're going to look at a package called Cheerio. And if I could have the TAs slack out this first assignment we're going to be working on together, that's the number 5 scraping, because we're going to have them work along with me. We'll go with this. This is Cheerio. You can just Google Cheerio.js, and it's a library that you use a node to pretty much call out to any website you would like, or, well, actually, it doesn't do the calling. You call it to a website, you get an HTML payload. You can give the HTML payload to Cheerio, and Cheerio can do this cool web scraping for you. So it can kind of disseminate information in the HTML DOM, get stuff out for you. You can filter, and the way they built the Cheerio syntax is really nice because it looks kind of familiar. I know this is, I'll try to zoom in. Yeah, it's like jQuery, right? So they use the $sign as their selector, and they have similar selectors here, and add class, and all this fun stuff. So you can play with HTML just like you would in jQuery, which is really nice, especially since we use jQuery a lot in this class in the beginning. So it should be pretty familiar to everyone at this point, right? So that's going to make it a little easier for you to get around Cheerio. The other library we use is request. Have you guys seen request yet? Yes? No?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've, I forget when they first introduced request, but you've probably seen request a little bit. So remember, we're going to use request, and request actually makes the call out to the website, right? So either for JSON or whatever it needs to get, this is how you do it. So request is really important. So we're going to start looking at our first activity. We're going to do this together. So remember, there's something about node packages that we need to do before anything else. And does anyone know what that is? npm install. Yep. That's it. So we have our package JSON here. It's got Cheerio. It's got requests. The two things we need. We run our npm install, builds us node modules, the package lock, whatever. All the stuff you need to actually run this code. So that's a very important step. I know JJ probably goes over it all the time. Hey, remember to npm install, and I'll say it in this class a lot, but it's pretty important. You know, without it, you can't do much. So let's go ahead and look at our server.js code, and I'm going to open up another terminal, and I'm going to, really quick, drag it on over. Just run node server.js. We'll see a bunch of crazy stuff happening. I can't blow this one up, so sorry about that. Or maybe I can. Nope. You can see I just run the node code, right? Node server.js, and a whole bunch of crap comes back. It's an array of a bunch of stuff, and if you look at it carefully, you'll notice it looks like HTML-like properties on JSON objects, and that's what it is. What Cheerio gives you, and that's what makes it so nice and so easy to parse through a lot of HTML. Because at this point, we know how to work with JSON, right? We know how to work with JavaScript objects, and we know how to get through those pretty effectively. So you can see we have a bunch of links here with the title, just a bunch of titles, right? Beginner questions, March, whatever. And we're actually making a query with request.js right now to Reddit. So we're going to our web dev, appropriately enough, right? To take a look at that and see what we get back as HTML from Reddit. And if you want to see what that page looks like, we'll go ahead and open that up. Go to reddit.com/r/web. Our web dev, and look, beginner questions, March 2, 2018. That's the first one that comes up in ours too. So that's kind of cool, right? We immediately get all of that HTML in JSON JavaScript object format. So let's go ahead and look at this code a little bit. And while we're working, there are other files that they sent out. There's a server 2 and a server 3 that are a little bit different. So you can feel free to check those out as well. But I can talk about server.js really quick. So we've got our two packages, right? Up at the top, var Cheerio and var request. And we're familiar with this package require syntax now, right? So we know what that means. We've got the whole package bundled up in that one variable. We can use it later. So the request library, I actually think last time I was here, we talked about this for the first time. So you might have seen this a few times at this point, if I'm not mistaken. So can anyone, just really quickly, as a refresher, tell me what's going on with this first call with request?
You're going to that website, and then you're passing it a callback function. It gives you the parameters of error, response, HTML.
Yep.
You're not going to see an error handling, but you've got you send the response back, or you would send like a response back for 200 if this was right, but you basically are using the HTML that you're getting from the website. And you're using Cheerio to parse that in as a parameter into their load method. And then you're able to grab the p.title tag.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like there's probably a bunch of them, because then you're running a for loop over them and creating objects with a key value pair of title and link.
Yep. Cool.
And then pushing those objects to an empty array.
That was very thorough. Awesome. Round of applause. That was great. Cool. So I'm going to reiterate again just for the people who are streaming. And if there are any questions that come up about specifics of anything, let me know. That was pretty thorough. So basically, yeah, we're making a call to request. We give it the URL we want to call out to, and then we give it our callback. Remember, callbacks are used for asynchronous programming. And there are 3 parameters in that callback function: error, response, and HTML. So as mentioned, there's not a lot of error handling in this little example code. In real production level code, we probably want to check for that, right? We'd say if error, do something, okay? Then we can handle worst case scenario, something bad happened. There's also not any checks for the response code that comes back, which is quasi-error handling in its own right? So you could get a weird response back or something, and you may want to handle that specifically. So like say you get a 204, you're not going to get any HTML back, so what do you do, right? So there's a lot you could do there that's kind of left out. Just know that they're there for you to use. Now, HTML is the one we're going to use the most. And even in the worst case scenario, something really bad happens, like this just chokes and sends you a weird 502 bad gateway, you're going to get HTML back. Every web server in the existence of humanity pretty much always sends back something in the worst case scenario, be it pure JSON or some HTML. And most of the time, in a really bad scenario, you get HTML. So regardless of what happens, we're going to get something back. So that's why it's kind of okay for us to just load up the HTML and go for it, right? We can pretty much guess, since it's Reddit and it's a pretty popular site, we're going to get something good back, unless Reddit one day decided to do some crazy something and they wait for us to try to make this call, and I don't know, we're not authenticated, so they just redirect us somewhere weird. But anyway, that's an aside. So we get our HTML, and we're going to load it into Cheerio, and we get this $sign. Now remember, we don't got to make a $sign. It's just a variable, right? But they use $sign as a nice notation because it reminds us a lot of jQuery. And since we're doing HTML parsing, jQuery is a nice allegory of how we could do it, right? So we're loaded up into this $sign. It's the loaded HTML, and it's going to let us access the selectors. And then we have this empty results array. And we're going to push all of the things we parse out into this array, as we saw in the terminal when I ran it myself. So then what we do is we initialize the first selector. So one thing I like to talk about, and I know we've all gone over jQuery, we're familiar with it, but I like to hit on this a lot because it's a really powerful thing to remember, is this $sign is just a function, right? So we know this now, I'm sure. But when we first start programming with JavaScript, it's always weird to see a variable that's a function. So it's just nice to remember that that's just a function. This selector that's coming out of Cheerio load is just a special function we get that we can do stuff with and get something back. We're getting some object back from the Cheerio function every time we initialize the selector. And from there, you could do a whole bunch of stuff. I mean, you could do each, you could do add class, you could do text, whatever, you know, just like in jQuery where you get this cool object back that has a bunch of extra functions on it. So we have this selector function. We're going to look for the title of all the p tags, right? The paragraph tags. And then we have to give the for each right here another callback. And this one's going to have the index, and element, the element we're pulling out of the HTML. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the title. So we use the selector p.title. All right, so we're going to find all of the p tags that have a title, and so it should be fairly easy for us to grab that title out and get the text. All right, so we
syntax where you use this instead of element, what would be the difference?
If we use this instead of element,
Yeah.
So when you use this, that has to do with binding of the whatever's calling the function, right? So what I don't know is if Cheerio automatically handles the binding of this callback function in the each function, okay? So what jQuery does is when you hit a selector and you get a bunch of objects back, it takes that callback you give it and it does the .bind. Do you remember the .bind from the constructor stuff and all that? So you could do effectively, you get a function, just say Looks like that. Actually, that's doesn't count. Right? So we say we have a function. When you have a function, you can do function.bind, and then you can pass in something else, right? That you want it to bind to. And what that becomes is this. So if I have another var object just equals an empty object, and I bind to object, whenever I call function in here, if I did this.name, it would, this.name would equal Carson, right? Because I'm bound now, this function is bound to the object, and so it's going to use that as this. So what jQuery does behind the scenes, I don't know if Cheerio does this, you'd have to look at the docs and play with it. It's a great question, by the way. What jQuery does is before it calls this each function right here, right? It takes this function, because it's just a parameter to the each function itself, right? It's a callback. It binds it to jQuery, whatever jQuery's context is, the $ or whatever, you know? And then it could use this inside of there, no problem, right? Sometimes, depending on the function, it binds it to the element. Each one itself might actually bind it to the element that you're pulling back. I don't remember with jQuery. But at the very least, it binds to jQuery's in a sense. So again, Cheerio, I have no idea. So you could try it and see what happens. And let us know.
By calling variable $, I know $,
Uh-huh.
but I mean, we're just calling random selection. It's just a name at this point. Why are we talking about jQuery?
Okay,
We can call it whatever we want.
that's a great question. So the question was, when we're doing Cheerio.load, why are we setting the name of the variable $? When we could pick any name that's probably more appropriate? Why do we care about jQuery? We don't care about jQuery.
Well, at this point,
But
we're not saying anything about jQuery. It's just a variable name.
the reason why they recommend and why the documentation shows that $ as the variable name is because the way you use Cheerio has very similar syntax to jQuery, right? So we use these parentheses. Yeah. See, we use these selectors, right? You know how in jQuery you could do like hash something and that'd be the ID, right? So you could do the same thing here. So this could be hash ID, right? And that'd find everything with the ID, the one element with ID. So Cheerio, what was that?
On that HTML load that you would put
Yes.
into that variable.
So you can imagine jQuery, while it directly affects the DOM in the browser, we don't have that here. We're in Node, right?
Yeah.
So we're giving it some HTML. We're loading it into Cheerio, and Cheerio's building us this very jQuery-like object. Because a lot of jQuery-like things. This is actually a jQuery-like function, right? That does a lot of jQuery-like things. And allows us to make calls to it that are just like jQuery selectors.
Okay, that's
So there's
why we named it.
Yes, that's why we name it $. There's
So that we
no...
can remind ourselves that we can use it as jQuery.
Yes, so we can remind ourselves that it can be used just like jQuery. Exactly, that's why. So is there a need to name it $? No. You can name it whatever you want. You call it jQuery, call it Cheerio, who cares, right? As long as it's not conflicting with the Cheerio variable you have above there. But it's a nice thing to do when you're using the Cheerio library because it reminds you it's very jQuery-like. So you could probably assume, to some extent, that the things you would normally do in jQuery, you could probably do here in HTML, right? It's trying to mimic that as best they can. So that's also a great question. In any library you use in JavaScript, at any point in time, are you required to give anything a specific name? No. Some libraries, maybe they have like, hey, we recommend this because it makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. It's up to you. You know, you're the one writing the code. So whatever you think makes the most sense is what makes the most sense.
And so then the callback just says basically for any tag within that variable where we have the HTML,
Uh-huh.
it could do something.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it's going to find every p tag with the title class, right? All of them. There could be hundreds and thousands. I mean, we saw there's a bunch, right? And then it's going to loop over all of them so you can do something. And it's returning this element is the p paragraph element right here you're going to work on. So if you do .text, you get the paragraph text out, right? If you did .class or .css or whatever, you know, you'd get those variables out just like you would in jQuery. So that's kind of the nice thing about Cheerios. It lets you act very much like you're still in the browser using jQuery, but you're just parsing some random HTML that you found somewhere. right? So that's pretty cool. Did you guys have any more questions about this Cheerio library? There's a little bit more going on here. We're pulling out the text. We're pulling out a link. We have the attribute href, right? So we're familiar with the hrefs. You got your A tags, right? And it looks like, what does this mean? Does anyone remember what this probably means? Thinking back to jQuery.
You're looking for the child div.
Just a filter for the selector.
Yeah, the filter for the selector, and we're looking for a child that's going to have an attribute href. So we could assume it's probably an A tag. Doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be an anchor. Could be though. Pull the link out. We're going to put it into an object, right? Just like this. Now, a little fun fact that they don't cover in this class I like. See how we have title colon equals title basically and link colon link? There's some sweet JavaScript syntax equals sugar where you can just do that. It's the same thing. If you have a variable shares the name as a property you're trying to put into an object, you can just directly put it in there. It's pretty cool. Does it save a lot of time? No, but I mean, it's clean, right? So that's just a little trick. It was right there in front of me, so I figured I'd show you. So we're pushing it to the results array, so then we can do whatever we want. In this case, we're just console logging. Cool. Any questions on this? We're about to do an activity that has to do with this. So you're all going to try to do it yourselves and work through this activity. We'll spend like 10, 15 minutes. Might have to cut it a little short since I'm probably going over on time. But give that a shot. If you have questions, you got your TAs here. I'm here. We'll help you out. Okay? Go.
I'm sorry. Oh, yeah, hold on. Sorry, did you want me to stack that skeleton for the next one?
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool.
My bad.
Sorry.
I forgot to mention that. Yes, the TAs need to help me out here. Otherwise, you guys can just sit there. That's cool, Yeah, there's 06 scrape starter. Sorry, I would have done it. I don't have the file. I just got the files on my machine. This is a really big repo they use for all the crap we have in this class. And it took me like 30 minutes to download. So there's a reason I took it off my machine. It's really big. Let's see. Let's go to scraper. So I know we didn't really get to go over server 2.js and server 3.js. There's more stuff in there that you can look at as well that I would like to talk about. But it's very jQuery-like. Go ahead and look at it if you get your own time, but I know we're working on an assignment that's very similar. So if you have questions, just let them rip.
Not big frequent things with you, like you at college. Now it's
So as you finish, go ahead and link to your server JS code that you write and post a link to the website you use to scrape. You get to choose what website you want to scrape. You don't get to use Reddit. So just post that with your code as well. And then we'll pick one or two maybe and we'll talk about them a little bit.
more specific. So if we yeah. How do we select that?
All right, so we're going to cut this one a little short. I know that was really, really short and probably not enough time to get really anything of substance done. We're running a little bit behind, and I want to go over more Mongo today. I think we get back to the web scraping too, either the rest of today or tomorrow. So anyway, does anyone have one that they'd like to share? Did anyone get far enough that they want to share? I mean, we can look at the other examples we have too, if there's no one out there who wants to. Even if you didn't totally finish, maybe we can look at it together and see, you know, maybe what parts you were just missing to get there or whatever. Anyone?
I tried the Phoenix new times.
Tried the Phoenix new times? What'd you get? Anything good?
They just gave me an empty object.
So a lot of people were getting empty objects or empty arrays or empty something, right? And that actually is kind of expected from some websites, especially these days. There are a lot of websites out there that do not actually send back HTML on the initial page load, right? They send back something that's empty or just a body or whatever that then calls some JavaScript or is all JavaScript that then loads, right? So it's possible you just hit one of those websites where they're actually loading up a JavaScript framework or something later. And so there's no HTML. So what are you going to do, right? And that happened to a couple people. That's okay. I know it kind of ruins some of the fun. Because you don't exactly get to see, you know, hey, look at what's coming back. That's really cool. But go ahead and try a little bit more at home. You know, see if you can come up with anything cool. There's a lot you can do with web scraping. So really quick, let's go ahead and look at another one of these examples that they had. Since we don't have anyone who's going to share, we'll just cover one of these, see if there's a little bit more we can go over. So they're going for a Ward's clean website section, which I guess is a real website. That's awesome. Go check this out. I gotta look at this. This is a weird URL. Just click it, huh? Oh wow.
Oh.
Look at that. That's cool, right? There's all kinds of stuff on here. So that's the website they're going for. You can pull back a whole bunch of stuff. They load it up. They're looking for the figure rollover, right? And then they're going to go ahead and find the images that are part of that. And let's go ahead and run this server 3 and see what it looks like. All right, let me pull this up. Woo, look at that. A ton of images. And, oh, I can actually click these. And they pop right up. Woo, look at that. So that's pretty cool. So there's a lot you can do with web scraping, right? I mean, it's not just like one little topic that you can cover because there's so much you can do. You could build dynamic websites from this. I mean, you could, a fun story about web scraping that I think is interesting. I learned this not too long ago. When Airbnb was first starting up to get some initial growth, one of the original people on the team actually found out how Craigslist posted ads. And they found out that they could do it with just some code to call out to the web pages themselves, actually like bake these calls, right? And they started double posting the Airbnb ads onto Craigslist too.
Huh.
So it's pretty ingenious, right? Those are the kinds of things you do with web scraping. I mean, you can do a whole lot. You can search through stuff. You can do all kinds of like viral statistics, so you can figure out like what kind of marketing you can do, where you can put stuff, or you know, there's all kinds of a crazy world out there with web scraping. So it's pretty neat. But we are going to shift gears for a moment, and we are going ahead and go back to MongoDB. So I'm going to post some instructions here, and I'll do these with you, or they'll just post themselves. That's cool. And I'll do these with you. So let's just take a couple of moments. Let's enter some animals into a Mongo database. I'll do that as well, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. Mongo. the create collection. You can use whatever you want to insert the queries. That's okay. I'm using the terminal. Yeah, you can use whatever you want to go ahead and get the stuff in there. The only thing we want to do right now is just get 5 animals into Mongo somehow. That's it. Let me look. Whoa, look at that. Is that better? All right, do we all got 5 animals in our MongoDB yet? Getting close? Okay, really quickly, we're going to go over sorting in Mongo. Okay, so if we remember MySQL, you could do like a sort by clause at the end, and then you could give it the columns you want to sort by. It was pretty easy. It's also pretty easy in Mongo. It's not as intuitive language-wise, I suppose. When you say sort by name, descending, I mean, it's pretty easy to tell what that's going to do, right? A descending sort by name. Mongo doesn't give us that luxury, but it's still pretty easy to do it. So if we want to sort, just like everything else, there's a dot sort command, right? So there's dot find, dot pretty, dot sort, dot insert, you know, all those things. So we do dot sort, and what you do is you pass in an object with the name of the property you want to sort by, and either a 1 or a -1. So 1 means we're going to sort it ascending. -1 means we're going to sort it descending. So for instance, if I wanted to sort by ID, which is a timestamp, right? So it means that encompasses the time it was entered to the database. So this would be like created by almost. You could sort by sorting by ID of 1 would mean sort them by the ID, which I think is the default. So and then you could do ID -1 and sort them in reverse ID, which would be the last one entered would probably be the one that you'd see first. Want to sort them by number of legs, which is a number field, right? You could do 1 to sort them ascending, or you could do -1, and the biggest number would be first, right? Descending will have the biggest number first. And then you can sort them by string, which would be the class. Same thing. 1 means you're going to do it from A to Z, right? -1, Z to A. Okay? So I'll show you really quick in my terminal. So here we'll use zoo. We're going to go db.animals.find. Now remember to use .pretty because it's really nice. And we're just going to go ahead and sort by name. And you can see penguin is my last one, right? So I start with bullfrog, then I have crocodile, Great Dane, monkey, penguin, sorted alphabetically. If I go ahead.
Does it matter where you use .pretty? You can use at the end, or does it have to be right after fun?
.pretty, I think you can go at the end. Let's find out. Pretty sure you can put these after the .find in pretty much any order, unless there are like, doesn't matter. Pretty can go anywhere. Pretty just formats the output, so nothing really matters. So yeah, that's the gist of sorting in Mongo. So just
their ID is a timestamp.
Their ID is a lot more than that actually. It encompasses a timestamp, but it's like a timestamp. It's a randomly generated set of numbers. It has to do with your machine's CPUs and stuff like that. It's crazy. Use a bunch of stuff. So it's pretty rare that you'll get timestamp collisions or ID collisions because of a lot of those things. And because the timestamp is part of it, I think it's like, you could look it up. It's like the first 10 characters are the timestamp. The next 4 are the CPU thresholds and stuff like that. So it's like, they do a bunch of crazy calculations to get it. So it's pretty much guaranteed to be unique and unique per machine, which is really nice. So any questions on sorting? Yeah, what's up?
So you just did name, semicolon, -1. Why do you do
-1 sorts descending, right? So that'd be like Z to A, right? If I wanted to sort Z to A in terms of names. So sometimes we need to see that, right? Sometimes we need to see from the last one first, and that's why we have descending sorts. Any other questions on sorting?
What would happen if I put a 2 in there?
Go ahead. Let's go ahead and try it. See what happens. I'm pretty sure it won't. It might still work. 1 and -1. That's what you get. Bad specification. Let's see if we can do multiple things, right? You can. So you can do by class and by name. So you can see, well, they're still sorted by name because name came first. But if we had multiple birds, then it would sort on that as well, right? So we do have multiple mammals. So if I go ahead and rerun that sort and I do class -1, okay, it didn't change this. All right, maybe you can't do multiple sorts. I don't know. I never really sort in Mongo. It's a great question. Something to Google later.
Separate these key values of comments, right?
So that is what I was attempting to do. So let's see if we can do, if we do class by -1. All right. We do class 1. What was that? Class? Might have been. I might not have read the instructions properly.
No, I'm just saying, you have pressing two parameters, well, first one was an object, but if you want to pass in more than one object, then you're pressing an array of objects.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, because it's an object, you can specify the properties, right? Because when you're sorting, the reason to use an array would be if we have multiples of the same kind, right? And since there's only so many properties on the object itself in Mongo, I mean, you can't sort by name and then name again, right? So there's no need for an array because we're only going to specify the properties at max once, so they can all go on the same object. So you can see here, when I sort with class 1, so that means it's sorting by the class first, and then name -1, it actually flipped Great Dane and Monkey. So Great Dane alphabetically comes before Monkey, right? Starts with an M. But because I've named -1 and their class is the same, this is a multiple sort right here. This is like a composite sort. And you could do this for as many properties as you wanted. And then it takes like stuff, and then it'll sort those like things in their position. Make sense? I wouldn't get too bogged down on sorting right now, right? Try to let it sink in. I know sometimes the syntax here with Mongo is really weird. I don't really like it all that much, to be completely honest with you. But it's supposed to be friendly to JavaScript developers, so they say. So try not to think too much about the syntax of it. Try to work with just sorting one property for now, and then as you get more comfortable, we can go ahead and add more in and play with it, right? So take a little bit of time in your own terminal, add some more animals or something, play around with sort for a little bit yourself, and see what you can come up with. If you come up with anything cool. We're not going to spend too much time on it. We're going to go to our next assignment pretty quick, but just take a couple minutes. All right, so we played with sorting a little bit. No, it wasn't a lot of time. What we're going to do now is introduce the Mongo.js package that you can use from Node. And as you can probably imagine, this is a nifty package to help you talk to Mongo.js from your Node projects, right? There's some other ones that we'll get to use that are a little bit more friendly, but Mongo.js is like the rudimentary level for talking to Mongo from Node, right? So it's a nice one to look at. Don't worry too much right now about how it works. We'll get into that with another assignment here in a moment. But let's just look at it for a moment. So here's the NPM page, right? So it goes over the README, tells you a little bit about how the MongoJS package works, how you can connect to databases and all that fun stuff, right? But the important thing to note are the functions that you can use. So db.mycollection.find, db.mycollectionfind1, update, find and modify, insert, sort. All of those functions we're very familiar with already from the Mongo shell, right? So we know how to use find in the Mongo shell. How would we use find, or what would we use find for in MongoJS? Anyone have an idea? To find things, right? And insert, what about insert? To create a new record in the Mongo database, right? Update to update, sort. So again, these are the same functions you've been calling from the Mongo shell. Now we're actually doing them from JavaScript, which is actually going to be very nice, because then it's like you're actually using JavaScript. You're not using this weird terminal, right? So you can use your editor. So it works out to be pretty fancy. I don't think you'll have too bad of a time with it. So our next assignment, we're going to be going into it a little bit. I'm going to try to start up this example here that they gave me. So what it does is it spawns a little project at localhost 3000. Hello world. Nice and simple. Oh my gosh, what did it just do? Not what I wanted to do. Oh, that's why. Yeah, it brings back a whole bunch of stuff from my animals table. Look at that. That's fancy, right? There's a slash name we can use, which didn't necessarily work, but that's okay. Maybe it's sorting by name. Oh, looks like it's sorting by name. There's a slash weight. Okay. So you can see, we can probably start to make a guess as to what's going on here, right? We have these endpoints on this little node service we're running. And it's making calls out to our Mongo database that we just created. And when you hit these different endpoints, it's going to sort for you. So that's what we're going to do in our little assignment. Okay, so there's TAs, there's a skeleton in 09 MongoDB and sorting, if you could slack that out. So you're going to go ahead and make these routes. You're going to spend about 20 minutes doing this. And you're going to do what it says to do. Send JSON response sorted by the name that you're calling out to, or by the route you're calling out to, right? You can add more if you finish early, make it a little bit fancier, do some other cool stuff too. But take some time, work with Node, work with MongoJS. If you have problems getting MongoJS to connect properly to your database, let us know. It can be kind of tricky. And then I'll slack out the link to the MongoJS package for all of you, so you have something to start with. Yep. Just MongoJS, just Google MongoJS will probably come up for you. But just in case you can't find it, there it is, npmjs.com/packages/MongoJS. So read through the docs, try to figure out how it works, and build us a little app.
nothing. Just
I thought you wanted to talk to me.
no, I'm good. I just
Wow. Okay. Just kidding.
I love your handwriting. So anything we can help you with? And things are going really smooth.
Yeah, they're going okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, though.
Yeah.
How's the job hunt going?
Oh,
Have you
yeah,
been looking?
I have a job now.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Wall CV. Yeah.
Nice. What is it?
Yeah, it's awesome. We're doing. I'm doing mostly PHP.
Okay.
I just started a project though with that uses React, Redux in the front end.
Cool.
That's fun. Yeah. You ever use Laravel? PHP framework?
I know of it. I don't use PHP. I abstain.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. It's kind of.
It's very much like Django and Rails and stuff, right? Where it just generates it all for you, and you just kind of.
There's like tons and tons of helper functions.
Yeah.
All over the place. Laravel, it's like has also just even more crap.
Yeah.
It's cool, like, but it's. I'm having to challenge myself learning like, because Laravel is like very opinionated about like,
Yes.
you gotta do it in like a very solid way.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
having to learn about like conversion of control containers. And
That's good stuff to know about.
it
though.
is though, yeah.
And it's not the thing. It's not in the JavaScript community like at all, which is something that a lot of people struggle with, especially as the project get bigger. I was
Yeah.
telling one of the students from the cohort that I did, like the biggest problem you're going to run into in your career is managing dependencies properly.
Yeah.
So if you can really understand that, everything else is pretty trivial. It's just a matter of learning the libraries and all that stuff. So,
Yeah.
but that's good. That's really good stuff to know,
Yeah.
especially early.
Yeah. Learning curve. I'm okay. Like I'm getting my projects done. It's still kind of like we're not like we're growing, but we still have a lot of like we still are kind of revving up. So
Yeah.
we don't have like a unit testing environment or any of that
Okay.
stuff. So.
Is the team overall familiar with like inversion of control, dependency inversion, stuff like that? Have they done it before? Is it new for everyone?
I think the senior dev is the one who's most familiar. The other two are not. So we're just like, and my boss kind of just wants us to clean up stuff that we have like immediate needs.
Yeah.
And he does care about some of the long-term stuff, so I think that's why he's hired more devs.
Yeah.
So that we can start building up some of that.
Right.
And move toward like having a really like like a testing environment and have like a really like good Git flow and things like that. But right now it's still pretty good. Yeah, it's interesting. Learning a lot.
That's good. That's the important part, man.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Good. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah. How about you? You're already working on where?
I work at Axosoft to do gig cracking development.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's pretty good. It's always a challenge and always interesting.
That's cool.
So.
And do you become an instructor?
No. Darcy wants me to be an instructor for one of the next cohorts.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a jury's out. It's a lot of work, right?
It is,
You know.
especially with a job.
Yeah. So I did it last time. I worked full time through the whole thing, and it's fun. I enjoy it. Subbing's no big deal, right? It's every now and then, but it's just a huge time commitment, and I've been done almost 2 months now with ours, and I'm pretty much enjoying my time after work. So, it's hard. It's hard to say like, yeah, I want to give up that time again. I enjoy doing it, but where is my time best spent for me? So
I'm gonna move to the sub pool. Well, for years.
yeah.
Need that time.
Yeah, no, I feel you. Take at least 6 months, take a breather, see what it's like. So,
Yeah. So.
give that money, pull that money, and you actually sort by, sort by within that. Yeah. But you want to close out. It's got to be that hard. No, it's close out. So it's going to be down. There's down. And then you throw whatever you need. Yeah. Yeah, you're sort of ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
Change, but you don't want to.
I mean, is this one about?
Yeah, there's just
So this is for the final call. Yeah, that's what we need. This is what we try to talk. We haven't tried yet. I was gonna focus on another thing. And what's the connection?
Oh, okay. What's going on?
Within here? Yeah, oh, okay.
It would be closed.
Okay, still be on the side.
Yeah.
Oh, did you do a mock meeting? Yeah, so.
I closed it down.
scraping ESPN, is it like because it's one of those sites that like dynamically generates?
It could be, it depends, is your HTML from that request come back as there's anything? Or have you?
It just, well, no, I didn't actually.
So if you console log the HTML get back, you'll at least be able to see what's coming back, if it's informed or not. Or something like that.
Just console log the dollar sign.
No, console log the HTML. from your console. And see if you're even getting the HTML back. And if you don't, then that's part of the problem.
Oh, yeah, I'm getting
So then it might be something with Cheerio, or maybe a selector that's weird or something like that.
Oh, you know, that was already.
So, right here. So it's this list right here.
So I would check out
See if this exists. Oh. Oh, here.
So start with that.
Yeah.
I would find something that's great. There. Get that out. You know you're somewhere, right? And then we'll try to get that element and take it back.
Yeah, that's fine.
That might regenerate that.
Oh, okay. Maybe this is going to be
Oh, maybe I'm
updated.
So function
that portion's like you make for each and stuff, and like they can run to.
Yeah,
You get both together, so
yeah.
that's what makes it tough, right? You get those so back.
But is this the right, would this be the right? So,
Starting at the dock, left, right?
yeah, I did it.
Try to ask them now, because that's what they're helping, that's probably.
We just make one, 2 weeks, so we're gonna go out here.
Doesn't matter how you do it. Those are the worst ones.
Yeah.
Then you figure out between the later and I do it for one.
I spent like half a day, John actually hung me out with it, trying to figure out what the hell's going on with my Sequelize app, because I spelled burger wrong. Like the whole day, like, I'm just like, it was like bugger or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just like,
That happens
the whole day.
all the time to me too, man. I feel you.
Wasted.
I feel you.
Oh, yeah.
What do you mean? Yeah, just slash name, and just, yeah, just think name or whatever it's. That's what it was. Here. It works.
Good.
Are you talking about the comments? Yeah. Yeah, you actually, yeah, it'll be a JSON video, you actually integrate your browser as an object, especially, well, you have the JSON.
And the rest are, with the rest are.
So you can go with it. Oh, you can do that's your current.
Oh, this is fire.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. That was one thing, that might help people select your gadget.
We can go.
And it'll help you like grab the CSS selector. What you do. Grab it and last it.
For the most part. Yeah. We had like the.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay. You can have a better one.
Whatever but he's just like, what was looking for? Are you saying? Yeah, get every name for each animal. Pull that function. So here's the find stuff. Find the guy you find where it is for pull that. So I'm applying. Oh, we don't have an animal. There you go. Put on. But what you're probably trying to do is you're helping, I would look into how to select. So we can use the points and sort and like I don't know. Pull that function. If you want to find
Okay.
then you have to, I'm talking about the, that pull that function. Oh, you're saying, oh, God.
So I can close it?
Oh, no, that's right, but that's the last. I don't want to change the route. Okay. So that's what we're trying to find.
Okay.
Right, how do we find those points? To find out.
Okay.
We don't need to put any object there. If you want to name that someone to the triangles, so how we use the sort. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
I'm saying, so here's how it works, right? So you could use OTB dot find, right? You could go like this and put object comma function. Or if you want to add more, so like you want to add more, you just close and find. Then you own graph.
All right, I'll give you a moment to wrap up what you're talking about right now, and then we're gonna go over this.
But don't close your yet. There are functions. Add as many as you want, but just remember that you want to add you have to close the find. These circles either find or sort and we don't.
Okay, did anyone finish? Yeah, you finished? Nice. Was it a good activity? Fun? Had a little bit of challenge, maybe? Kind of, yeah. We're familiar with a lot of it at this point, right? We've seen Express. We're just going to go over it real quick, and then we're going to take a break because we have one last mega thing to do for the rest of the class. As an aside, I just realized why the class feels so empty to me. I've only taught JJs on Saturday. And so I just realized half the people are here because it's a Monday, Wednesday. I don't know why. I just realized that. I don't know why that even crossed my mind, but it didn't. Anyway, so for those of you who didn't finish or maybe got stuck, that's okay. We're getting into new territory with the MongoJS library, right? So kind of difficult to throw these new libraries at you. But let's go through it real quick. So we've got our two dependencies, right? Express and MongoJS. We know all about requires now and what those do. We go ahead and we initialize our Express app. We've done that before at this point. Is anyone not familiar with initializing the Express app or need a refresher on it or anything like that? Cool. We're going to set our database URL. Now, some of you may have had a hard time because this might not have been enough, right? So it says database URL, but you notice it just says zoo. Well, that's not really a URL. Last time I checked. The reason why is it defaults to MongoDB://localhost port 27017. And that is the default port and URL for a Mongo installation on any machine. If you do a custom install, you can change that port and all that stuff if you want, but that's what it's appending on. So it adds the MongoDB://localhost 27017, and then it adds /zoo. And the / whatever specifies the database we're connecting to. Now remember, we made the zoo database. This is why it just worked for me out of the box, because that's the default port I'm using, and I named the database zoo. So it worked great. And then we're telling it the collections that we want to load up. And in this case, we want to use animals, and that's what I called mine. I called it animals, so it just worked, right? So that's why mine seemed a little bit more magic than yours might have been. But that's what's happening there, okay? So we just passed the default quote-unquote URL right here, and it does kind of behind the scenes magic. We get the collections we want, and voila, we get this database object that is our MongoDB connection wrapped up as a little .db, right? The event emitter on, right? Have we seen these before? Is anyone familiar with what this .on means? So there are these things in Node, I won't go into them too much, called event emitters. And they have things like .on, like Node is
Or
built.
emit, right? Another one?
What was that?
Emit.
Emit, yeah. Emit is one, that's how you force an
That's how I
event,
did
right?
the socket IO. It was like on one end,
Yep.
on the front end, and then emit on the
Yep.
other.
Exactly. So those are called event emitters, and Node is built all around them. And so you can emit an event, and then anything that's listening with .on to that event name can pick it up, right? So when Mongo freaks out, it emits an error message, right? And then .on catches it. So if we get an error, we can console log it out and see what was going on. Otherwise, we're going to get to the fun stuff with Express. So first things first, we're going to make our Git route, and it's just going to be to the home directory, right? The initial index path, and it just sends back hello world. Nothing fancy there, right? Then we're going to go ahead and get everything from the database. So this one was just get everything from that collection. No problem, no sorting or anything. So that's the /all, right? So we have our callback with recres for request and response in Express. Then after that, we have to do our call to Mongo.js, db.animals.find, just like we do it in the Mongo shell, except we have to give it our callback as the second parameter. The first parameter has to be the filter object, okay? And when we're not filtering anything, we're getting everything. You just give it an empty object, and that counts for get everything. We give it our function here, our callback.
Why would you write, or how are you able to write, this is something that I wasn't quite sure of. How are you able to write db.animals instead of like db.collections? So you pass in the string animal, but how is it recognizing that?
Okay, that's a good question. So the question was, how does it know that there's a .animals property on this DB object that represents the animals collection, correct?
Yeah.
So there's a convoluted answer to give you, but basically you're telling it we want the animals collection. What Mongo.js is doing is taking those collections, it's going out to Mongo, loading them up, and then you can actually take any arbitrary string and add it to an object in JavaScript. So I'll show you. We have object, right? Just like that, okay? So this is, imagine this is the database. This is how it starts. It's got all this binary information, blah, 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 in memory. It's a bunch of crazy stuff. And it says, we know you have an animals property, right? So just say it looks like this. Oops, animals. What it can do is then pass in animals right here, make it whatever it needs it to make it. And, well, actually, it's property. I'm sorry. Pass property right there. And what it's going to do is it's going to see what's in this property variable and actually make it a property on the object. So I can reference it as obj.animals, and it's a function, right? So I can reference it that way. So
Is there anything to the syntax where you wrapped it in like an array?
yes, that means don't just use the word property, right? So that's like what's the word for it? It's like an expression evaluator, okay? So if I did that, the property name would be property, right?
Uh-huh.
But because I wrapped it in brackets like this, so it looks like an array, it evaluates the expression. So the other thing I could do as well that's equivalent is just, I keep typo. I can type animals like that, and that's effectively the same as both this and both that. The difference is if I have a variable and I want to run the expression first, you can. And you can see how that could be helpful, right? Because I could put like string.join and a bunch of stuff in there and actually build the property name from nothing.
Yeah.
So that's a really neat thing that JavaScript does, and I don't know of other languages that do that. So that's how they know that it's animals,
Okay.
using that name that you pass in. So anyway, any questions on that? It's kind of a crazy thing, but it's one of the weird things about JavaScript objects that are really neat, actually. So we run our callback to find all the animals. If we got an error, we're going to go ahead and handle that. Otherwise, we're going to send back all the animals we found. Just send it back as JSON and let the web do the rest. So for home, or for name, sorry, I totally misread that. slash name. The only thing we're going to do different here is we're going to sort by name. And we do that by calling dot sort. Now you may notice that dot find doesn't have anything in it in the function, right? Doesn't have a filter or anything like that. It doesn't need a filter if it's just empty and you don't specify the callback there. But because in the last one there was a callback in the dot find, we need this empty object to specify the filter. In this one, it's just assuming there's no filter, and we're giving the callback to the dot sort, so we don't got to worry about it in the dot find, because we want to call it after it's sorted, right? So it's a different function it's invoking because you gave it different parameters. And so here's our callback now. After the sort, we get the stuff back, and when we do our res.json, we send back what we found, it's going to be sorted by name. You can imagine weight going to be very similar. We're doing these, though, descending order. We're sorting the weight by -1. So we're going to get the heaviest weight first down to the lowest weight. And then we're sending those back out as JSON. Right? Any questions on any of this? Cool. Let's take a 15-minute break. Then we're going to start our next big assignment. It's going to pretty much take the rest of the class. So 8:15-ish, 8:20-ish, around there.
Yeah, I can do something right now.
I'm sure there's Vegas options. Yeah, people are betting on like, you know, how long, how long, you know, the match is gonna be. They're gonna bet on it. Where's that from? Yeah, it's literally right past I haven't had there's I don't know
If Aaron otherwise, find everything. The one we have set up.
Hello.
No, sorry. How's my interview? No. How was it? What was it like? I remember the first time that's great. I hope but yeah, thank you for the query. Right.
I never knew what so this whole thing would be suffering after that. The more about
That makes sense.
But if you just do it.
Qualifier there.
I mean, like, both skills.
Right.
Yeah, I had a lot of
did one. I'm not.
Yeah.
I know, like,
I went to yeah, I studied programming, which is like go there and some volunteers. So I was cool because I went there. I was like, oh, okay, I know some like I actually learned to teach up. I don't know. I think that if you're good at it,
I've never heard of it. I don't know.
like,
I don't know if lots of and like, oh, yeah, I have
that is what's better on the side. When you figure it out, like, I would say, I did go there before. I'm like, if you're
I want to say like five. So there's basically say I want. Like I would usually request them to take them. And like you give them your gift. So they'll look at your gift and
every other day was
so far. We all have
less than we need to hear. And then even less
and they have like
this is like the word
there's someone who had posted something. This is the job that I'm gonna get.
what you like.
I'd like to have this and she got back then. Try the they just get big data. Everybody loves. Right now, everybody knows honestly. Yeah. So right now, I'm going to be flashing. Huh? Oh, wait, yeah, I learned about that in med school. Yeah, and I also it's good. Like I would meet up app. There's a lot of stuff on there. And we put together. And they're cool people. Like developers go there. Nice. People with jobs go there. It's just like a network, especially who's quite extremely. That was like pretty then also they have like video comments. Yeah, like there are people like from out of state, like work. No, come.
Yeah.
That is a weird thing. But I would look on. I've never done that.
Yeah. Right.
Put it out. Maybe
All right, so we're gonna start working on part of our last assignment. So we've got this sweet front end to our Mongo that we're gonna work with. You guys are gonna make something very similar to this, right? And I can go look at it. You sort by name, and then it resorts everything by name. I can do sort by weight. It'll resort everything by weight, descending, right? Just like we had. So this is just like the Express app we just worked on, except for instead of having, excuse me, instead of having just URLs you hit, we have buttons that effectively do the same thing, right? So it's pretty neat. Flat. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the TAs go ahead and slack out to the next project skeleton. And you will find instructions in the public/app.js folder. So if you go in there, let me just see if I can open it up really quick. You'll get a skeleton that looks something like this. And in public, we'll have app.js. It will have this big old to-do block, and we'll tell you what you need to do for your instructions. You'll have about 25 minutes. We'll work on it, talk about it for a little bit, and then we'll move into the last bit of today's class that'll take up the rest of the time.
We do, but you are not familiar with this function. Right? Now imagine you did the same thing with jQuery, right? So inside our function, right? We're just like var. This is not an example that applies to what we're currently doing. This is just one example, right? Var ul equals jQuery select ul. Remember when you put the HTML tags, that calls create element, right? We're creating a new element, right? We just do we have our data, right, in our function. We have our f data, right? Now we're just going to basically just say we're going to create our for loop, right? Let's say let I equal 0, I is less than data I plus plus, right? And we just go, var li equals jQuery selector li. Obviously, we're not going to be doing this for using a table, so this example won't apply to you. But if we were to create a UL, if we were to create an unordered list, we first want to create this outside, right? And then here we just do ul dot append. And then we just do append. No, actually no. Before this, we're going to want to do li dot text data I dot name, and then we append it to our ul append. So that's sort of a similar idea of what we're going to want to create as well. But instead of what that would look like in terms of what kind of JSON you're getting back.
I don't know, but I want to show you. You said you know, and I don't know why you said
So you don't need to basically just have to
I don't.
We don't need this as action. We do it. Go online. Some people will just like right. I live in the right. But now I'm going to then finally I don't actually know. I've been surprised for a while.
All right, how's everyone doing? Is this a tougher one? There was definitely a lot going on in this one. So really quick, we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to move on to the last assignment, which is very similar. We're going to be using a front end. It's going to communicate with Mongo, and we're going to do that kind of fun stuff. So there's some examples here that we can use to kind of help us with the next assignment. So first of all, the public app.js is kind of where all the magic was happening, right? And if you take a little bit of time to inspect it, you'll notice some familiar things. We have our $. This time it's actually jQuery. So we can expect it to be real jQuery finally. And you'll notice we're doing some AJAX calls. Get JSON, for instance, get calls, stuff like that. It calls to the all route and then displays some results. So if we quickly look over it, we're not going to go into too much detail because it's mostly jQuery, but I wanted to show how we could make calls to this server from the front end. You notice we get a bunch of information back is the JSON from the Mongo server, or from the server, the Express server that we're running to call Mongo. We go ahead and we clean out our table, and that's the table that you can sort and all that fun stuff. And then we go ahead and loop through all of the results we got back as animals. And we're just going to create some table structures based off of those animals, right? So they're just plain old TDs in a TR, nothing fancy there. And you just append each one. So that's how you add them to the table, right? And then there's this set, which one's active. A lot of stuff we've seen before, but the important thing to remember here is you can use get JSON from AJAX, or just a regular get call, or even just the $.AJAX if you really wanted to, and just make a real quick, easy call to those endpoints you have on the server to get your JSON back. Your data comes back as raw JSON. So any questions about what's going on here? Anyone want to see any of it? Talk about any of it? Cool. So I'm going to open up another browser. And actually, I don't need to. I still have this open. I have another process running. It's a hello world, okay? And there should be, is this the right one? I might have opened up the wrong app. Let me double check. Oh, it seems right. Let me just look at this real quick. All right. Well, the next assignment, while I'm looking at it, what it's going to be used to do, actually. Okay, here we go. So there is a /scrape. So what we're going to do is we went over the web scraping at the beginning of class. We went over Mongo and how to use Mongo later in the class. Now we're going to combine the two. So we actually have we're going to be building a /scrape endpoint that runs a scrape. In this case, it's doing on a Y Combinator. Does anyone know what Y Combinator is? It's just it's a tech website. It's pretty good. Y Combinator is a special term in functional programming, but news.ycombinator.com. It's pretty cool. There's a lot of good tech articles. I'll show you. But we run the scrape, then we go here, and this is all the data that's stored in the Mongo database after the scrape. So what this assignment's going to do is expose an endpoint that you can call to a scrape, and then you're going to actually upload stuff into the Mongo database, and then you're going to have another way to display it back out. So it sounds simple. There's not a lot going on. There's two endpoints really you need to facilitate here. But it's deceptively more work than it sounds like, right? So I'll select out the instructions, and they will go ahead and select out a template. Really quickly, I'll show you the data in Mongo. Let me just blow that up. So if we go to Mongo and we show DBs, we can use scraper, show collections, db.scraped data, find pretty. We'll see everything that was dropped into the Mongo database for me by the scrape process. And it's just ID, title, link, right? So the ID is generated by Mongo. It's just some titles and some links. Very similar to the Reddit one we did. So that's what kind of output you guys are going to see when you're done. So again, I'm going to go ahead and select out the initial instructions, and the TAs will select out the skeleton. To this assignment. And you pretty much have the rest of class to do this. We'll talk about it briefly at the end, kind of get some feedback to see what we're going on. But the important thing to know is you got two routes. You have the all route, which is going to go ahead and show everything that you got into the database from your scrape. And then you'll have the scrape route, which will do a scrape to a website of your choosing. I don't know if they'll have a default one in there, but go ahead and change it. Whatever you guys want. And just try to get it in there. And then there's some bonuses too that you can go ahead and try to do. And we'll get to those a little bit later. We have time. This is Y Combinator, by the way. It looks really ugly, pretty heinous looking, but there's actually some good stuff here. Hacker News, you might have heard of that one. So it's another good website if you guys want more tech-related articles and stuff. I recommend you check it out.
Yeah. I don't need this one.
Yeah. Well, it's really what we want to do. Grab the website. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would think if they're doing both, they should show it them. Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
That way you just have one.
I need to have this right here. So I need to-
None of this will actually do anything, so.
Throw that right in there.
Which one is the initialize goal?
With
Do
it.
it, insert that way, this one here. And it's executed.
I wouldn't want to have the full array before I insert it.
Well, I guess, okay, never mind, You're,
Oh, I guess you're right. It's not it's not gonna execute it.
you could do, you could just.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
Sometimes you're gonna find.
So here I could go full insert as well as I.
Or you just.
With whatever iteration. Oh, I guess I could do extra insert.
You found the goal.
Yeah.
Had your own idea.
Yeah, I wanted to go with full array. I can only make one database.
Yeah, no problem. I guess they're different.
Yeah.
That is.
Sure. I mean, wouldn't you want to make only one database? Well, no, not like every single time they do this thing. Insert. Yeah. Right here is not right. It's not inserted. So this is the whole right there.
But I'm not really leveraging.
What would be? Well, here I'm building.
Yeah, the building is small.
Well, this is their each part. This is just building the array.
Well, no, I know that. I'm just saying, the result is. So, you, call
Oh, okay.
You just leave VB not necessary.
Oh, I tried to use string insert many cookies.
What is the,
I didn't actually see insert many. I just I linked it. So maybe it would be. But this is what I found. What I'm saying for you. So I tried insert many.
oh, yeah. I think all gives me.
Yeah.
But you have to, that would quite.
Oh.
You would have to call Bill.
Oh, okay, so we'll just insert as one and then finally X after. Great.
I think there was
I think it was.
yeah, so,
So I was using it.
as of, yeah. For that,
Oh, yeah, I remember that, yeah.
we actually
Okay. Good. So this one works. Oh, I can probably just do both. I can probably just sub out results output and just both. These, yeah. Yeah. What's it supposed to be there? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, then I might. So you use something called prompt on this?
Well, okay, so if you look at the
I built my own promises in, sure. Yeah. I mean, everything works with, yeah, for sure. Yeah, from all right, you're going.
So here's how the idea is that what you could have done, right? You could not say this was
Sure.
yeah, is that you would push the document, right? And after you
Not say
build an
is a
array,
method within the Monday here that.
yeah,
Yeah.
if it's promise, it's not promise. The
Okay.
idea is that you can say have some promise, right? You can say this document.
Right.
I'm not sure if it's one, right?
Yeah.
You build an array of documents, and then after you build that array, it's called promise.
Okay.
All of that does is iterate on everything, all of those promises inside it. And then you can also, after promise, all you can add document.
Okay.
And then wherever document.
So I could have, I kind of do this a little bit, kind of lazy, if you will, but I could have probably done this all within one round, right? I could have done this all within one round, where it goes get, it does that promise, and then it sends it down.
Yeah.
With that, I don't know. Thinking
No,
about it.
no, like, I think yours is better though.
Yeah. I could probably throw this all within. Okay. All that. there's no res, there's no res.
You kind of.
Or, but would it be within that scope, or was that,
Yeah, but let's say.
Oh, yeah, 'cause
Call red dot something. Try to call it off.
right here, I could use this. But I actually want to get rid. Oh, result, oh, yes.
Right, and
Oh, second result of that.
That way, it's all.
yeah.
Just put it at, oh, yeah.
One thing that I want to do is put the molds in the right hand of the bowl. Use the ending field into that. And then the circle to the end. There you You could just do results for the pens and then that. Okay. Yeah. So the the board. And then you can give it a go back. Okay. And I've worked just the same example like we make. Now, this isn't trying to save that. We're trying a way to save that. Post. So how many times do you put back on? Never do it, so grasp of that logic, I have
Put it inside.
we can evaluate all the life. Every time you put that so all those districts you apply it into that, yeah. And then the second round is straight or is that logic make sense? Okay, so you have a straight that right?
What's up, man? Good. Knock out here. Yeah. Got a couple more minutes to read over this last assignment, and then be on our merry way.
Yeah, I'll be here for office hours.
Is your class done?
You're just doing assignment and then special storage assignment. That's gonna be over. We said our like goodbyes, I guess. I don't have a lot to say. Whole time. Actually, we just hired him.
He's hired again.
He's scares the daylight.
Also, I have a good salary, so.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. But it'll be rad to work on daily. Yeah, but he scares the daylight. Oh my god, it's just like being on the university today too. They're like, right. Okay. Okay.
Because we were just learning database. So
Yeah.
Something to think about. But you guys are sub is great. Thank you.
Yeah. Let me know. Like I said, let me know what you guys are. It's just like I'll try to make it out.
basically what people done, they use web scraper.
The harder thing
to generate that piece of web scraper that's on the web page. Go to the other, get the sampling. So that's great for web pages. The gathering information, yes, but and basically how to order it I mean, no, it's, they do this. And then they keep this, like, people go back. A lot of people, and then they have this like index. The deep thing actually was like this big dark water. That's how they go. That's how
See all these advertisements. Whatever, out there is Google, you can actually be Yeah, if
All right, let's go over this last assignment. Did anyone finish? Yeah, we had a few people finish. That's awesome. Did either of you guys want to share your code at all or go over it? I mean, if you don't, it's cool. Slack it out and I'll pull it up. Oh no. All right, let's go to the Slack channel. All right, you can come on up here. Yeah. I'm just gonna paste it into here. Let me see if we can get it. Come on. There's probably an easier way to do this.
I don't know if I certified it first.
It's cool. Don't worry about it. I'm not gonna grab the app listen parts, so we just cover it how it works.
Okay.
So yeah, go ahead, walk us through it. So Eric's gonna walk us through.
Have to save it, right?
What was that?
To save it? Okay. So I basically went through the docs that they had. Obviously, I didn't really use the home/get requests, but I threw everything all within Scrape. And there was two ways. That first I did it where I had all working, where you would have to first scrape and then go to all to get your results. But then I just threw the results of this in a callback function so that all you had to do was just go to localhost/scrape, would scrape everything from Reddit, just the example from what we did right when we got into class, and then it would display the results as a JSON object right in your browser. So this was pretty boilerplate from the first example, just grabbing the title and the link. This is where I had to use the Mongo.js docs. I did a bulk insert where while I'm iterating through what I'm getting back from the URL. Oh, and the other part is I had to initialize bulk, and this was on the Mongo.js docs as well. It's just db scraper, and then this is their function. So I iterate through all the different p tag titles, got my object set up here, inserted each one, and then you have to run a bulk.execute function, which will actually take everything that's been accumulating in your bulk.insert and push it to the database. So I pushed it to the database, and then in my callback function, I ran a find all, and then I sent it back to the front end through my res.json all the way from the get request response. So if everything is working, there's no app. Oh, okay. Sure. Okay.
The bulk, where you're building the object from bulk, is it just accumulating it as you go, and then when the...
Yeah, it sounds like it's just accumulating, and it only makes one database call with this bulk.execute function, just so you're not like hitting your database with a new entry. What I was doing originally was I was trying to build an array, and then, like with the regular Mongo syntax, it was like the insert mini, and you could just insert an array of objects. That didn't work here. I didn't really read the docs at first. I was just like, a lot of things are similar. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and see if it works. It didn't. So then that's where I found the bulk. So, okay. Control Alt.
Control and the tick mark.
Oh. Okay.
Yep, and then just node npm. Or actually no, you're gonna say node.
Okay. Running, and then right here.
Yeah, you can just open it up and go to localhost 3000, and you'll be at yours.
So it's should be hitting the. Oh, and then it just doesn't look like you've got the JSON parser.
No, I don't have a JSON parser.
So yeah, I mean, I have the JSON parser where it kind of like prettifies everything. But it hits the Reddit page, gets the results back, and then sends it to the front end through res.json.
That was really awesome. Let's give him a hand. So there's a few things there that he did. I don't know exactly if they're in the specs, but they seem like they're above and beyond. The bulk, right? That wasn't in the specs, right?
Both was in the docs.
Oh, was it in the docs, or what was it in the requirement for the homework or the assignment?
Oh, this assignment? I don't know. I didn't see this.
So bulk, I don't think was. So that's awesome that you found that and you use that. Like that's a great way. That's thinking like a programmer, right? So what's efficient? When you're working with code, the least efficient code you'll ever write is the code that talks to another process. So regardless of how you do anything else, really, if you're talking to another process, it's magnitude slower than anything else. So the fact that you did bulk is great. You load up the bulk, you're only doing one call to Mongo, and voila, it handles all of that. The other thing he did was some error handling, right? If there's not an error and we have the OK status callback, then we can go ahead and continue on. And that's great too. Those are things you want to think about when you're writing your code. So this is awesome. Thanks for sharing. With that, if no one has any questions, you're free to go. If I don't see you guys again before you graduate, congratulations. I know it's been a lot of work. You're almost done. It's a lot of fun, kind of scary, right? But you all do really well out there, and there's plenty of jobs. So you just got to work a little bit.